When you stop responding instantly to his messages, something powerful happens inside you. You reclaim your sense of control. You no longer act out of impulse or desperation. Instead, you respond from a place of strength and self-respect. For too long, we've been conditioned to think that quick replies mean care, that constant availability means love, but in reality, it often means losing ourselves. By choosing silence, you remind yourself that your time, energy, and attention are valuable currencies that should never be handed out carelessly. Every time you pause before replying, you're teaching yourself patience, self-worth, and the importance of emotional boundaries. You begin to realize that peace of mind is far more powerful than any text that keeps you guessing. And in that silence, you rediscover the calm confidence that comes from knowing you are enough without external validation. This decision to ignore his texts for 3 days is not about playing games or creating drama. It's about rewiring your emotional habits. When you immediately reply, you reinforce a cycle of dependency, one where his attention becomes the fuel for your happiness. But when you hold back, you start breaking that cycle piece by piece. You learn that silence can be an act of self-love, not punishment. You understand that your response time doesn't define your worth. Each moment of restraint strengthens your emotional discipline and your ability to choose peace over pressure. The space you create through silence allows you to reconnect with your values and your priorities. You are no longer reacting out of fear of losing him. You are acting out of love for yourself. Every second you stay silent is a declaration of independence from emotional chaos. It's a statement that says, I am not here to chase anyone who doesn't meet me halfway. In that quiet, you begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. Your intuition becomes louder, and your emotional balance starts to return. You stop wondering what he's thinking and start asking yourself, what you truly want. That shift is where your power lies, in choosing awareness over anxiety. It's a rare kind of strength to resist the urge to respond, especially when your heart wants to reach out. But that strength is what builds the foundation for emotional maturity. The longer you stay silent, the more you realize how much control you actually have over your own peace. Your silence teaches him something too. It teaches him that your world doesn't revolve around his texts, that your happiness doesn't depend on his attention, and that you are not someone to be taken for granted. When you stop being readily available, people start noticing your absence. It challenges them to reflect on their own behavior and the value they've placed on you. Suddenly, the effort he once ignored becomes something he misses. The energy he once overlooked becomes something he craves. Silence, when used with intention, becomes the loudest form of communication. It communicates self-respect, confidence, and emotional intelligence, qualities that naturally attract admiration and respect. But beyond how it affects him, this silence transforms you. It becomes a reminder that your happiness has always been within your control. You begin to see that your emotions no longer have to be dictated by someone else's actions or lack of effort. You learn to find comfort in your own company, to enjoy your solitude without feeling lonely. Those 3 days become a mirror reflecting your inner strength. You start realizing that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And in that realization, a beautiful calm replaces the chaos you once felt. The silence that once scared you now empowers you. The act of not responding also forces you to slow down and observe the patterns in your relationship. You start seeing who reaches out when you stop trying, who values communication, and who only shows up when they need attention. This pause allows you to evaluate the emotional investment you've made. Are you nurturing something genuine, or are you feeding an illusion of connection? Through silence, clarity surfaces. You begin to identify what feels right for your soul and what only drains your spirit. You stop confusing emotional availability with emotional dependency. Instead of clinging, you start choosing peace, and that shift becomes your quiet revolution. Ignoring his texts for 3 days is more than just an act of withdrawal. It's a spiritual reset. You remind yourself that love shouldn't be something you chase. It should be something that flows naturally. You begin to feel proud of your restraint, proud of your growth, and proud of your decision to prioritize your own emotional health. The world often tells us that silence means weakness, but in truth, it is a language of strength. When you stay silent, you learn that not everything requires a reaction. Not every message deserves your energy, and not every person deserves access to your peace. And that realization becomes the first step toward emotional freedom, the kind that can never be taken away once you've tasted it. When you decide to stay silent and ignore his texts for 3 days, something unexpected begins to happen, not just within you, but within him too. The absence of your messages becomes louder than any words you could have said. He starts to notice the stillness where your constant warmth once existed. The routine he took for granted suddenly feels incomplete, and that gap begins to speak volumes. This silence makes him confront a truth he's been avoiding. Your presence was never guaranteed. It was a privilege. When you step back, it forces him to look inward and realize how much space you actually occupied in his life. The very comfort he once overlooked becomes the thing he misses most. During those 3 days, he starts to replay conversations in his head, searching for clues as to why you stopped replying. That quiet pause becomes a mirror reflecting his own behavior back at him. Every unread message he sent before feels heavier now. Every ignored effort suddenly matters more. It's in human nature to crave what is no longer easily available. When you were always there, he didn't need to think twice. But now, your silence creates a subtle discomfort, a curiosity that grows into realization. He begins to understand that the energy you gave so freely had meaning, and losing it isn't something he can ignore. In that stillness, he begins to see your worth in a way your words never could have shown. You see, people often appreciate consistency only when it disappears. When you stop being instantly available, you create a contrast between what was and what is now. Before, your attention was like air, always there, unnoticed until it's gone. But once you withdraw, the silence becomes undeniable. He starts wondering if you've moved on, if you've lost interest, or if he pushed you too far. Those thoughts begin to stir emotions he didn't know he had. The absence of your voice, your laughter, and your presence becomes a reminder of the emotional connection he once felt secure in. Now, he's left with the realization that connection requires effort, and effort is something he neglected. This distance you create is not cruelty, it's clarity. By stepping back, you give him the space to recognize his own mistakes. You stop feeding his ego with constant validation, forcing him to earn your attention again. The silence acts as a boundary, one that says, if you want access to my energy, you have to meet me halfway. It's not punishment, it's balance. It's teaching him that your attention is sacred, not something to be taken lightly. And while he processes this, you grow even stronger within yourself, because you finally understand that sometimes love needs distance to reveal its depth. You learn that silence can heal, restore, and empower in ways words never can. As the days pass, the uncertainty begins to test him. He starts checking his phone more often, wondering if you've seen his messages, questioning why you haven't replied. That curiosity slowly turns into reflection, Maybe he realizes he was too distant, too careless, too sure that you'd always be there waiting. In that silence, regret begins to take root. He might even feel the sting of missing someone who made him feel seen, someone who genuinely cared. This emotional awakening is what your silence brings, a quiet storm that makes him evaluate what he truly wants. And in that storm, he learns that losing your attention means losing something irreplaceable. Silence has a mysterious way of amplifying emotions that were once buried. The same person who once doubted your importance now feels the ache of your absence. He might try to distract himself, but the thought of you lingers because energy like yours doesn't just disappear. You've created a void, and that void carries your essence, your laughter, your kindness, your sincerity. When you remove yourself, he finally sees how much value you brought into his life. The attention you once offered so freely now becomes something rare, something he realizes he should have cherished. In the space between your last message and your next, he begins to miss the version of himself that existed when he had your presence. While he's realizing all of this, you remain centered and composed. You're not using silence as a weapon, but as a form of quiet strength. You're allowing time to reveal the truth, who truly values you and who only valued convenience. By not responding, you create an opportunity for self-awareness, both for him and for yourself. You see how easily people show their true priorities when the dynamic shifts. Some will reach out with genuine concern, others will stay silent too, revealing where their interest truly lies. Through this, you gain insight, not from his words, but from his actions. And those 3 days of silence, though small in number, become a powerful lesson in self-worth, patience, and emotional intelligence. When you choose not to respond to his texts for a few days, something profound begins to unfold inside you. You start gaining emotional clarity. In the beginning, it may feel uncomfortable because silence exposes what distraction used to hide. You suddenly become aware of the emotions that were buried beneath the surface, the ones you avoided by constantly engaging. Without the noise of constant messaging, you begin to understand what your heart is truly feeling. You start asking questions that matter. Am I holding on to him, or to the idea of him? Is this connection genuine, or just a comfort zone I'm afraid to leave? This quiet period becomes a gentle mirror, reflecting not only your emotions but also your patterns. During those 3 days, your mind begins to slow down and your heart starts to settle. What once felt urgent now feels less significant as the emotional fog begins to clear. You realize that sometimes responding quickly keeps you trapped in confusion, while stepping back gives you space to think clearly. You begin to understand the difference between reacting out of habit and responding from awareness. When you stop trying to fill every silence, you allow your inner voice to speak louder than your fears. You hear your thoughts without interference, and in that quiet, your intuition finally has room to breathe. You recognize that clarity doesn't come from constant communication, but from conscious stillness. This period of silence helps you see the relationship for what it truly is, not what you wished it would be. Without his words influencing your emotions, you can finally assess his actions from a distance. You start seeing patterns, the inconsistencies, the moments you overlooked, and the times your effort wasn't matched. The illusion of connection starts to fade, and reality begins to show itself with honesty. You begin to notice that love is not proven by how much you chase, but by how much peace it brings you. As your emotions settle, you realize whether this bond truly nourishes your soul or just drains your spirit. And that realization becomes the beginning of your inner awakening. As you spend time away from your phone, you slowly start reconnecting with yourself. You begin to notice how good it feels to wake up without anxiety, to breathe without waiting for a notification. That small act of emotional distance starts giving you freedom you didn't know you needed. You start doing things that bring you joy, reading, reflecting, laughing with friends, or simply existing in peace. The silence that once felt empty now begins to feel healing. You're no longer measuring your worth through someone's replies, but through the peace you feel within. That space teaches you that fulfillment comes from within, not from attention outside of you. You begin to realize that emotional clarity is not about forgetting him, but understanding yourself in the process. The distance allows you to separate your feelings from your fears. You start to see the truth behind your emotions, that sometimes love can be real, yet still not right. You recognize the difference between missing a person and missing the comfort of being needed. This understanding gives you power because it helps you make decisions based on self-awareness, not loneliness. The more you reflect, the more you understand what your heart truly deserves. This clarity doesn't erase your emotions. It refines them into wisdom. You start to view your silence not as a pause, but as a powerful transformation. Through this stillness, your emotional balance begins to strengthen. The things that once triggered anxiety no longer hold the same power over you. You stop waiting for validation because you've learned to validate yourself. The silence becomes a kind of emotional detox, cleansing you of overthinking, attachment, and constant need for reassurance. You learn to find comfort in uncertainty because now you trust your own resilience. You begin to enjoy your own company, and in doing so, you remember the parts of yourself that once got lost in the noise. This phase teaches you that healing often happens in quiet moments, not in conversations, and that emotional clarity isn't about control, but acceptance. Eventually, your silence becomes your strength. You realize that those 3 days were not about making him chase you, but about helping you reconnect with your truth. You no longer feel the urge to explain your silence because it has served its purpose. It has grounded you. You've discovered that clarity is not found through confrontation, but through calm. And once you achieve that calm, no amount of uncertainty can shake your inner peace again. You now know what you feel, what you want, and what you're no longer willing to settle for. That level of awareness transforms the way you love, the way you respond, and the way you protect your peace. In that silence, you didn't lose control, you found yourself. When you stop responding to his texts and give yourself space, you are not being cold, you are setting a silent standard for how you deserve to be treated. Every time you choose not to engage immediately, you're reminding both him and yourself that your energy is valuable. This simple act sends a powerful message. Access to you must be earned through respect, not convenience. You stop rewarding inconsistency with attention, and that's where real transformation begins. When you hold back from reacting emotionally, you start teaching people the level at which they must meet you. You show them that your time and presence are privileges, not guarantees. Silence, when chosen with confidence, becomes the language of self-respect. By ignoring his texts for 3 days, you create boundaries without saying a word. You communicate through your actions that you will no longer participate in one-sided communication or emotional games. It's not about pretending to be strong. It's about being genuinely grounded in your worth. When he notices your absence, he's forced to reflect on his own actions, to see how his effort compares to yours. Suddenly, he realizes that attention from you is not automatic. it must be matched with consistency. This shift creates balance in the dynamic, replacing emotional dependency with mutual accountability. You begin to feel the difference between connection and convenience. And in that difference, you find your power. This self-control builds emotional maturity in ways that constant talking never could. When you choose silence over reaction, you choose peace over chaos. You realize that not every message deserves an answer, and not every person deserves instant access to your emotions. The act of restraint shows that you are no longer moved by impulse, but guided by intention. It teaches you patience, not the kind that waits for someone to change, but the kind that waits for clarity. As you grow more emotionally disciplined, your energy becomes sacred. You begin to understand that responding less doesn't make you distant, it makes you discerning. That discernment becomes your protection against emotional manipulation. In those 3 days of silence, you also teach him something about effort. He begins to understand that if he truly values communication with you, he needs to show it through consistent actions. He realizes that attention cannot be taken for granted, because silence has replaced the noise of easy availability. You are showing him, without confrontation, that your standards have changed. You're no longer responding to half-hearted energy or mixed signals. Your silence holds him accountable in a way that words never could. It challenges him to rise to your level or risk losing the connection entirely. That's how real respect is born, through action, not argument. This process also redefines the way you see yourself in relationships. You stop measuring your worth based on how much someone texts you back and start measuring it by how much peace you maintain. You understand that self-respect means not chasing validation, but creating emotional balance. When you no longer seek approval through constant communication, you start attracting people who value depth over convenience. You begin to embody calm confidence, the kind that doesn't beg to be understood, but simply stands firm. You learn that boundaries aren't walls, they are bridges to healthier relationships. Each moment of silence becomes a lesson in how to protect your emotional energy. And from that protection grows unshakable confidence. Your silence becomes an act of empowerment rather than punishment. It teaches you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. You realize that your boundaries are not meant to push people away, but to filter out those who don't align with your peace. The more you practice emotional control, the more natural it becomes. You start seeing how people treat you as a reflection of what you allow. So when you stop replying immediately, you are no longer teaching them that your time is disposable. Instead, you're setting the tone for respect, effort, and genuine connection. And in that subtle shift, you stop chasing closure and start creating peace. Through this act of silence, you redefine what it means to love yourself. You understand that self-worth is not built in moments of attention, but in moments of restraint. You stop needing validation from messages because your strength comes from within. You realize that being unavailable for disrespect doesn't make you unkind, it makes you wise. You become selective not out of arrogance, but out of self-awareness. You start attracting energy that matches yours because your silence filters out what doesn't. And when you finally choose to speak again, your words carry more weight. Your presence holds more value, and your boundaries command quiet respect without you ever having to explain them.